Happy 4th of July. Today we're going to be unpacking true freedom. Have you been wanting to feel free? Have you been wanting to be free? Have you been seeing things outside there in the world that you feel like are taking away your freedoms? Well, in this episode, I'm going to tell you how you can truly be free. And this is going to be I'm going to give it to you straight kind of episode. Because if you've been pointing fingers at the Democrats or the Republicans or the left or the right, you've been pointing fingers at governments, you've been pointing fingers at the World Health Organization or private equity firms, you've been pointing fingers at people related to the pandemic or corporate capture, you've been pointing fingers at the globalists, we're going to point our fingers at ourselves today. If we really truly want to be free on this day that we celebrate our freedoms, we're going to have to take a new level of responsibility. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here today. And this is the 1-year anniversary of A Changed Mind podcast. We launched it a year ago. We've had over 1 million downloads in the last year. So I want to thank you and acknowledge you. And I want to give you the special gift of this episode in commemoration and celebration of it. And what better time to have a conversation about freedom than today? And doesn't it feel like our freedoms are being taken away? You guys have been telling me this. I've been seeing the comments on my YouTube videos. I've been seeing the emails. Can David talk about what do we do about the fact that we've got a two-party system that's taking away our democracy? What do we do about the fact that we've got this traditional corporate media that's not giving us the real scoop? What do we do about the fact that the military-industrial complex is driving us into wars that we don't want to be in? What do we do about the fact that Bobby Kennedy Jr. was not allowed on the debate stage? And by the way, some of you are Trump fans, Biden fans, and everybody seems to be saying that was wrong. They're taking away our freedoms. Censorship, taxation, the World Economic Forum. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Well, today we're going to talk about radical responsibility and how it is the only way to truly have freedom if that's what you want. And that is what you want, right? That's why you're here. You're here because you want freedom in your emotional experience. You want freedom in terms of your financial security in your bank account. You want to be free to do what you're meant to do in this world and achieve your full potential. You want to be free from the codependence and the perfectionism and the comparing and the indecision. That's why you're here, right? You understand that you create your own reality. You know that thoughts are things. You've read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. You've listened to some of my other episodes, or maybe this is our first time together, but you're here because the YouTube algorithm is like, hey, you're going to pick up what Dave lays down, and that means you're seeking to become a better person, and you know that your beliefs are creating your reality. So you know that if you're experiencing financial insecurity, you've got to change your beliefs around money. And you know that if you're experiencing challenges around your health, you've got to change the meaning that you're giving that experience around your body. You're wanting to create massive change in your life. You're wanting to be free. Yet it seems like out there at a macro level, not in our own individual lives where we're taking responsibility for what we're creating, you're getting very, very good at not blaming other people, not blaming other things, and realizing that if I want to create change in my own life, it's a change in my own thinking. But then there's out there. Out there's a different game, right? Out there, it's a bunch of rich people, powerful people. Out there, it's traditional media, a captured system. And so what we need to do is we need to talk about all these things. And we have to solve these problems, and it's their fault. We're pointing a lot of fingers at a lot of people. Sometimes left is pointing the finger at the right, right is pointing the finger at the left. Sometimes we're just pointing fingers at everybody. And like I said, if we want to create change, we have to point fingers at ourselves, because just like we're creating our own reality in our individual lives, collectively we're creating everything that we're complaining about out there. Everything. I'm going to tell you a story to kind of make a point of how this works and how if you really want to change the world, if you want to create a better world, you got to change yourself. It's not just some bumper sticker. I was having dinner with my wife and her mom. We had just sold our home in Florida. We were looking at buying another home in Florida. We have our primary residence here right now in Puerto Rico. And my wife and my wife's mom owned the home that we sold in Florida. And somehow I wasn't aware of this, but my mother-in-law had this idea that when we buy the new home, she's not going to be on the title or the deed. Now, to be clear, I have no problem with my mother owning part of the home if we're going to roll some of the equity from the old home into it. But I didn't know it. She was upset about it. And it came out in conversation at this Spanish restaurant over tapas. And I said, well, why are you upset? And she said, well, what if something happens to Carol, right, who's my wife? And she said, and then you marry another woman and she doesn't want me in the house anymore and you kick me out of the house. I'm going to have nowhere to live. I'm going to end up homeless. And she was serious. And I thought, wow, man, that is so interesting because we've had over 10,000 coaching conversations over the past 7.5 years. And one of the big fears that I see that most people have, no matter what stage of growth they're at in their bank account, their business, their career, their life, is not being able to afford housing and ending up homeless. Like, what if I can't pay my mortgage at the end of the month? What if I can't pay my rent at the end of the month? And, you know, at least here in the United States, I don't know if it's the same everywhere else, the fear always ends up being homeless and living under a bridge, right? It's always the under the bridge is the end point. Well, I did another episode where I explained that all of creation already exists. Anything that will ever be created already exists in what we're referring to as the quantum field or the akasha or in God, in God's mind. Everything already exists, right? Edison didn't invent the light bulb. I know many of you have told me other people, like Edison didn't invent it, period. Other people did. But my point is, and don't miss it, Edison didn't invent the light bulb. He tuned into the idea of the light bulb because the idea of the light bulb exists in consciousness. All of creation already exists. We're just activating different portions of creation and bringing it into our reality. But all of creation already exists. So there's an idea around controlling housing and putting people in a situation where they can't afford housing and potentially many people struggling to stay in their homes or becoming homeless. That idea exists in consciousness. And if enough of us beat the drum of that fear consistently enough, it'll activate that idea. And then something will materialize into our collective reality to make that our experience. Well, most recently, we discovered how powerful private equity firms have become. Right? They control trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in the global economy. They assign who sits on a variety of boards. Those board members are often aligned with their agendas. And so it creates this coordination of companies across individual markets and all markets that many people believe are enacting a global agenda. And the private equity firms play a really influencing role in this. I don't disagree. But recently we became aware of the fact that private equity firms like BlackRock and State Street, and there's probably a dozen others, are buying up residential housing with the trillions of dollars of capital that they control. And their idea is to control housing, control pricing. And so we blame them. Most people go, I don't want that happening. I don't want the most powerful organizations in the world coming in and dominating what should be almost like public service markets like housing or electrical or other utilities or water. Sure, we've always had real estate investors who buy a handful of, individual residential homes or multiple apartment units, or maybe they own 120 units, in a building or even several buildings. But we don't want, the most powerful organizations in the world coming up and just swallowing neighborhoods and becoming a corporate landlord for a lot of practical reasons, right? If you've got issue with your payments, it's a lot easier to sit down, with like us. We rented our primary residence for a while. And if the tenant had a payment problem, we'd have a conversation with them and we work it out. Not so easy to do if you're talking to a private equity firm, right? So we blame and we become upset about these private equity firms buying up residential housing, taking away our freedoms here on this 4th of July, this Independence Day, right? All the different ways our freedoms are being taken away. But we are the ones who are activating these ideas and consciousness through our fears that someone at a private equity firm receives, and then they're just putting their capital to work, doing what private equity firms do, and then we want to blame them. They shouldn't be doing this. Of course they should be doing it. The government shouldn't be doing this. The Democrats shouldn't be doing this. The Republicans shouldn't be doing this. They shouldn't be disallowing RFK Jr. on the stage. They shouldn't be destroying the environment. They shouldn't have lied to us about the pandemic or 9/11 or whatever, Vietnam, JFK. Yes, they should. That's what governments do. That's what private equity firms do. That's what billionaire corporations do. That's what they do. You're upset at them because they're doing what they do. And the problem is not that they're doing what they do. The problem is that we think they shouldn't be doing what they do. And so we become entangled with the structure itself. And this is very problematic. See, if you're living your own individual life and you say, look, I don't want to experience financial insecurity anymore, I would say, well, then focus on prosperity and abundance and you'll create it. If you were trying to create more financial security for yourself, I wouldn't say, well, pay attention to the financial insecurity. That wouldn't make any sense. But we're wanting to create a world that represents the values that you and I hold: honesty, transparency, fairness, justice, by paying attention to a system that doesn't represent those values. We're wanting more freedom by paying attention to and talking a lot about the absence of freedom or the restrictions on our freedom that we're seeing in the world today. If you apply that to creating in your own life, it would make no sense. But somehow we think we must do it when we're talking about these problems out there. But what we need to do is point the finger at ourselves. See, this is one of the problems with fear. Fear is like Smith in The Matrix. When you become aware of something that you think others should be afraid of, and then you start talking about it, which is what independent media is doing right now, right? Russell Brand, The Hill, Jordan Peterson, even Joe Rogan, like whatever you want to call Russell Brand, well-meaning people who are making us all aware of what we should be afraid of, and now we're more afraid because we don't have the tools to actually work with the fear, right? When you are elevating that level of fear, all you're going to do is create more of it. If you're just talking about what the problem is, you don't solve the problem. You solve the problem by moving into the solution. But what we're doing right now is we're saying they should have told us this about the pandemic. You know, it wasn't a pangolin. It was from a lab where the NIH and the DOD were doing gain-of-function research. And now we need to testify and find more people and talk more about it and blame more people and find more problems. But that doesn't work in our own individual lives. Why would that work at a collective level? So we have to start taking responsibility. Everything that we're seeing out there that we would call unfair or taking away our freedoms or totalitarian control or however you want to describe it is just a materialization. It's an activation of ideas and consciousness based on the unprocessed fear that we hold in ourselves. Eleanor Roosevelt said the only thing to fear is fear itself. She was right. Montaigne said that back in the 16th century. It was very wise. There's nothing to fear other than fear itself. And so if you truly want to be free, both in your own individual life and you want to create a free world, we cannot keep talking about the things that we are afraid of. We cannot keep pointing fingers at those things that we think are going to take away our freedoms, because that's like continuing to focus on and give energy to financial insecurity and the fear of financial insecurity and thinking that that's going to be the path to abundance and prosperity. Doesn't make any sense. So what do we do? Well, look, if the millions of people who are afraid of losing their homes are activating ideas and consciousness that are finding their ways to willing recipients within private equity firms who are then putting those ideas to work in order to materialize that reality so the millions of people actually experience it, then what it sounds like we need to do is detoxify ourselves of fear. We have to purge ourselves of fear. If the things out there that we perceive as threatening our freedoms and our democracy are actually just projections or manifestations of our unprocessed fear, we better get to work processing our fear. And there's a lot of it. Because right now, humanity holds thousands of years of unprocessed and unmetabolized trauma. Think about it. It wasn't that long ago before we were raping and pillaging each other. I mean, they're horrific things that we were doing to each other before we became quote-unquote uncivilized. All of that sits in our cells. It sits in our consciousness. It sits in our unconscious psyche. And we avoid working with it. You're here because you're willing to work with it on an individual level. And what I'm saying is don't get caught up with the illusion of thinking that what's happening out there at a global level is anything different than what's happening in your own life. And don't get caught up in thinking that the solution is anything different than the solution for your own individual life, taking radical responsibility. Looking at the reaction that you're having to these situations and circumstances and what they bring up inside of you in terms of fear and working with the fear. That's what this channel is about. This channel is about the certainty of the goodness of the future. This channel is a sanctuary for the human spirit. This channel is a place where you can identify those misunderstandings that you have, those unmetabolized fears and traumas that have been passed down from your parents, from their parents, from their parents, from their parents, from their parents, and then socialized into some sort of mutant normalcy that we're all living right now, that's also manifesting itself into these structures that are taking away our freedoms and doing your role in it and working through the fear, transforming the fear. That's what independence is. That's what this Independence Day represents. We have freedom. It already exists for each and every one of us. It's freedom of your mind. No one can take that away or give that to you other than you. And no one can infringe upon the sovereignty of your life, no matter what happens in the world, if you're living unshakably fearless. If you've used the right tools, the right processes, you've done the work to heal yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that life may not have a plan for you, and that plan may be 40 years, 60 years, 80 years, 90 years. Who knows how long you're going to be here? I think death is a big mystery. But even if you look at 9/11, because people will say, you telling me everybody in 9/11 attracted that to them? Well, there were some people in 9/11 who were supposed to be in the buildings who weren't in the buildings that day. There were some people who were supposed to be on airplanes that weren't in airplanes that day. There were some people who showed up at work who didn't need to be at work. There were some people who, weren't supposed to be on that plane and got on a plane. That's not saying you're blaming people. You're just saying there's a system of intelligence functioning here that is based on what we think. And each of us individually are materializing the results of our own life, and collectively, we're creating the world that we're all living in. Hey, it's David. Just a quick interruption to your regularly scheduled episode by your favorite sponsor. I want to tell you about my book. It is available on Amazon right here, right now. A Changed Mind, Go Beyond Self-Awareness, Rewire Your Brain, and Re-Engineer Your Reality. In this little book are all the frameworks, the tools, the methodologies that I talk about on this show and that I've used to actually change my mind, and that tens of thousands of other people have used to transform their bank accounts, their businesses, their relationships, their health, their spiritual connection, everything that you want to achieve. This is the way to achieve it. And Amazon has done us a good one right now. It's significantly discounted. So you can go and pick up your copy, or better yet, pick up a copy for a friend too. There's nothing better than giving the gift of transformation right now. Hop on over to Amazon. There's a link in the show notes. And if you love the book as much as I loved writing it for you, do me a favor, let me know that and leave a review. And now, back to your regularly scheduled episode. So if we're seeing things that we don't like out there, we don't have to keep paying attention to them to solve them. Now, there's a lot of clickbait out there right now because, unfortunately, we're addicted to fear. We're not addicted to faith. Faith is a muscle that we have to build. So you look at your news feed right now, even people who used to inspire others like we do here of the certainty of the goodness of the future, who are running these thumbnails that are saying the world's going to end, everything's going to collapse, there's no way to escape, they're going to take you too, they're coming to get you, with these gross thumbnails. Turn it off. I'm speaking as a reformed addict, not just in drugs and alcohol and pornography, but this political porn and this doom porn that's out there. Turn it off. In the same way that I invite you to turn off your fear of financial insecurity and stop paying attention to what little amount you have in your bank account, turn it off. And God bless them. They're playing a role. It's just not a role that you need them to play in your life anymore. There have been great teachers who have come that taught us the way. One of them was Jesus. And sometimes I think about, what would Jesus do? And I'm not saying you need to be a Jesus lover. I'm not saying you need to be a Christian. I'm not saying you have to even believe Jesus existed. But the character and person of Jesus inspired us to love everything. So love what you see out there. Forgive what you see out there. I love the Democrats and the Republicans because they're inspiring a non-two-party system. And I love that. And now I'm focused on the emergence of this liberated system. I love what I'm learning and forgive the pharmaceutical industry and everything related to what happened during the pandemic, and everybody has their own different opinion, because all of this has helped me come to appreciate how powerful my immune system really is. How powerful my immune system is. What an amazing body I have. And all of the incredible tools that we have out there to live long, healthy lives. I've come to appreciate my freedom of movement even more. I never really appreciated my freedom of movement and the fact that, especially living here in the United States, I can go anywhere in the world. and that I can even go down my street and feel safe until my freedom of movement was taken away. So I'm grateful for all of these experiences. I don't need to process them or think about them or discuss them with other people anymore. They've inspired me to an expansion. They've inspired me into the next level of the promised land. My job now is to walk to the promised land. It's not to hang out with Pharaoh anymore. You know, when Moses came and freed the Hebrews, they didn't rebel and rise up against Pharaoh. What did they do? They walked away. That's a metaphor of how consciousness works, how vibration works, how our reality works. We're supposed to say, thanks, Pharaoh, for the experience of slavery, but no more. See ya. We're walking away. But there's an indulgence, there's a comfort, there's a certainty we have with fear, and you have to realize this. That's why it's so polarizing. That's why it's so compelling. That's why it's so cunning and baffling and powerful. Fear will draw you back into it. Fear is alluring. Fear in many ways feels good. And walking away from that, as my friend Paco in AA says, warm blanket of shit that we get so cozy wrapping around ourselves, it can feel scary. That's why in the story of the liberation, the true freedom of the Hebrews, at one point when they're heading out into the desert, which is the uncertainty and the discomfort and what they weren't used to, they said, hey, we're scared. Take us back to Pharaoh. So you can keep hanging out with Pharaoh if you want, but don't be surprised when that's the system that you're living in. But on this Independence Day, this July 4th, this day of freedom, let's recognize that we are free and we're free to create any change that we want to create in the world. Why? Because we're free to think. Yeah, Dave, but what if they do this? Look, right now you're free to think. So choose what you're going to think about. Are you going to appreciate the freedoms you have, or are you going to focus on the freedoms that you observe are being taken away? Are you going to continue to talk about what's happening out there with all of these different characters and players that are simply a manifestation of the unprocessed fear inside of you and inside of all of us? Or are you going to do the work to take a big shit and metabolize that fear? Are you going to move towards faith? Are you going to start believing in something greater than yourself? Are you going to start aligning and finding other people who are resonating at the same frequency? And are you going to be a part of the movement that's going to create the promised land, not by deconstructing or taking down the old ways, but just moving into the new ways? Does that mean that there aren't things that are going to happen in our experience that might invoke fear? No, there are, and there always have been, and there will be. That's why doing the work we talk about on the show is so important. That's why learning how to stand unshaken amidst the crashing of worlds, as Paramahansa Yogananda inspired us to live, is so important. That's why you have to be in this resistance training. That's why you have to liberate yourself of your limiting beliefs and this lens that is designed to perceive fear into a lens of empowered decisions and empowered beliefs. That's why you got to free yourself of this stuff that was passed on generation after generation after generation that's accumulated inside of you. That's why personal growth is the most important work you could be doing right now. The byproduct of that is going to be navigating effectively through any circumstance or situation, other than what's God's will for you. Because you know what? When it's my time to go, it's my time to go. And if my higher power needs to put me through a period of financial insecurity to re-strengthen my faith in Him or in it, that it will always bring me financial abundance and prosperity, so be it. I respect that. I understand that. I accept that. I hope I accept that when it happens as much as I accept it in this moment. Because nobody does this perfectly. But we're free. We're free, and no one's taking away our freedoms. Period. Not even the end of the story. You think about what the founding fathers of this country represented. It was an idea of democracy. And that idea, in order to be born, required being able to defeat the greatest military that history has ever seen. Their story, you almost wonder if it's even real. It sounds like a biblical story. 50-something men and the powerful women who stood behind them, who signed the Declaration of Independence, and this ragtag group of untrained military men and farmers being so persistent and consistent and resilient that finally, England gave up. It's unreal. But it shows the power of a proper mindset, right? And the freedom that was born within the hearts and minds of the American people, and why we have stood as a testament to people everywhere of what's possible. But it's not really about America, a day of independence. It's about recognizing that every single day is a day of independence when we've got free minds. Free minds create free people. Fear-based minds create an afraid, enslaved people. And you're the one who gets to determine how you live and how you think, not someone else. So it doesn't matter what's going on in the external world. You've got a responsibility, an ability to respond to what you're observing out there through the way that you choose to think. And my recommendation is don't give any more attention, even though it seems so logical, even though everyone will tell you, oh, you're just putting your head in the sand. No, I'm not putting my head in the sand. I'm intentionally turning the other way because I understand how reality works. I understand physics. I understand metaphysics. I understand behavioral psychology. I understand neuroscience. I understand what the great spiritual teachings told us to do. And I'm not going to pay attention to this anymore. I'm going to bless it and thank it because it has catalyzed a focus of my energy and my attention and my desire on creating just the opposite. And that's the direction I'm moving in, towards the promised land. And you know what the beautiful thing is? A lot of people are realizing this and waking up to this. There's a lot of us walking right now. And I want to celebrate that today. This 1-year anniversary of our podcast, after 1 million downloads, 1 million opportunities for us to grow and change our minds together. That's why I believe in the certainty of the goodness of the future. I believe it is an inevitability that we are going to be the most thriving species the universe has ever seen. And that there is nothing but great things in store for us in our future. That's why, and you know what? I fell victim to it a few times with some, maybe clickbaity type of thumbnails. But that's why some of my most recent episodes have been thumbnails that talk about believing in the certainty of the goodness of the future, expecting miracles every single day, knowing that you are good enough, that you've always had enough, that you have enough, and that you will always have enough because that's what's true. So thanks for letting me get all fired up on the 4th. My own little fireworks display over here. I appreciate you. I love you. If there's anything I can do to support you, I will. We are in this together. But be very, very clear. You've got your freedoms. Whether you keep them or not is up to you. And that comes down to where you direct your attention, what you buy into. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. Use the fear as a mechanism to propel you towards the vision that you have and that we have for an extraordinary future, and we will 100%, predictably, consistently, inevitably create that future together. I love you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Hey, it's David. Hop on over to davidbear.com. Click right here. There's also a link in the show notes, and sign up for our newsletter. You'll get immediate access to my free Mind Hack ebook, as well as a couple of trainings to help you master the inner game. This is a great way to stay informed and be a part of our community and be notified of special announcements. Click below, head on over to the website, get subscribed. If you loved this video, make sure you check out this one or this one, and I will see you in the next video.